All right, I'm going to start trying to hold the camera sideways here, see if I get better video. And I think that's how I was supposed to be doing it. I might have to change the way my GoPro is mounted in my line mount also. But anyway, this board I shaped last year, in probably September of last year, and I just didn't get around to working on it. I did paint it, so I'm gonna have to sand through the paint to rework that bottom. But this is the deck. I'm gonna vacuum bag the deck. I don't know if you can see it. It's really pretty rough, but that's just fine because it's gonna get a layer of glass between the high density foam, the Divinyl, and this deck. And I like it kind of rough in there so it holds some resin and some glass, and it creates a good bond. Yeah, I wanted to mention the dimensions of this board. It is about 19 inches wide, and it is about 5 foot 6 inches long. It's a really big board, but this is designed for light wind and primarily for surfing. So the wind isn't always that great when you're surfing. So I just opened a fresh thing of Sharpies, and what I like to do is I like to use the packaging as a holder. See how I cut the top off with a razor blade, and I just hang it here right on the wall. Yeah, you can see it's pretty warm this morning up here. It hit 105 yesterday, so it's going to get warm. But now I have my Sharpie that I need, and I'm going to trace the outline onto this Divinyl. All right, so I dragged it to one side of the Divinyl and drew a line, and then pulled it over a little bit because this deck will be sitting inside the rails, and I will taper it down to fit flush with the styrofoam portion. In this case, the Divinyl can easily be cut with a pair of shears, and that's what I'm doing. All right, so this is the rocker jig I'm going to use. You can see this will go inside the vacuum bag, and this piece of plywood, I want the rocker to be just a little more than what it is, and so I'll put that piece of plywood here. And also what that does is that prevents it from bowing, because this is going to go into a vacuum bag, and once it's in the bag, it will be sucked up on the rail sides to meet the height of this thing that'll be in the bag with it. So it'll tend to put a little bit of roll in the bottom. That's a bit of convex, and I'll show that to you later as I'm shaping. I'm having trouble putting my vacuum bag parts together because I haven't used it in a couple of years, and I guess I misplaced it. Okay, so I went to the local auto parts store. They didn't have what I needed, so I took this piece of hose, this tiny little hose that hooks up to this, my little vacuum pump. And what I did was I found that I could use a piece of shrink tubing. So I just heated it up with this lighter and made a connection here. I think this is going to work just fine, because this is where it creates suction, and this thing here, you'll see later how I attach it to the bag. So I bought these nifty little T's. These are nylon T-fittings, and I've got to make one of them fit to this little valve, because this introduces air into the line where I'm creating a vacuum. This tiny little valve here, this is the valve handle. And so I need to get this onto one of these. So what I'm going to do now is just heat up the plastic, and it should thread right in there. Let's see, there you can see the threads on the inside there. If I can get them to bite on the plastic, I will have a seal. And as always, I like to use the packaging as a storage container. This is ideal. You just hang it on a hook somewhere, on a nail somewhere, and you got a nice little container, easy to reach in and grab a tea. And what I've found is that a serrated blade, so this is an old kitchen knife, the serrated blade cuts through the plastic better, and you can easily create a serrated blade on your grinder. It won't do a nice smooth blade, but it'll make a nice serrated edge, which is what you need for cutting through cardboard and plastic. So I have a great assortment of tees to pick from. I mean, they even come like this, where you have a big one on one end, a smaller one. So, and keep in mind, by just heating the end up, you can make it fit the threads. Now keep also in mind that this is just a suction device. This is for a vacuum bag. You don't want to try the trick that I'm doing if you're putting compression on it and trying to squirt liquid through this hose. Then you're likely to have leaks, unless you can hose clamp them. So anyway, it all works if you try. Okay, so I did one here, and this fit nicely in there, but then I realized it had a big end, and that doesn't fit into the hose. I tried heating the rubber hose, but I guess it's kind of heat proof, so that didn't work. So I found another one here that will fit into the hose on both ends easily. And I whittled this down a little bit on my grinding wheel, and I have to clean it up a little bit with a knife, and then I'll heat it up, and it should thread right into this, just like this one did. All right, I think I got it to work. I got it ground down and threaded in there, so we'll have to see if it works now. And like I say, you know, you got to be a caveman. You just got to keep thinking of different ways to make something work when you don't have what you need. And always put shit away where you can find it. Got those there, got all my nifty drill bits and all my stuff. I'm learning the hard way that I've got to get organized if I want to find anything that I need. All right, I'm going to perform what I call the Ziploc baggie test. I got a Ziploc baggie here. I'm going to connect my suction to it and see if it works. It's been years. It's been years since I used this thing, but it's definitely working. You can see the vacuum that this bag is putting on. We got 15 pounds of vacuum. At 15 pounds. And that's a nice tight seal, as you can see there. Oh, and the pump shuts off at 15, which is perfect. So it's got an automatic shut off, which is great. So if any air leaks in, it'll relax. And if I need to let air in, I've got this little pin valve. And let's see how that works. Just, there we go. All right, that's dropping air pressure, and the pump is back on. So that's cool. If I need to drop air pressure, I can do that, and I'll tighten it back up. Oh yeah, it's working. Perfect. So the pump has its own little switch here, so it runs it up to 15, and that looks just about right. And so the vacuum bag, the Ziploc bag was a really good test here. Look at how that is nicely squeezing on that piece of foam, getting every wrinkle there, which is what I want to happen. And there it kicks on. If there's a little leak, it kicks on again and keeps the suction up there at 15 pounds of suction, which will be good. All right, I'm going to put some wings. This is going to be a wing pin, and this is where my traction flutes will go, right under here. So we're looking at the deck, but there will be traction flutes right under these wings. Since I was able to test this out on my previous prototype, that goofy looking whiteboard, these things really, really work. So this is going to be a very interesting pintail. Now keep in mind, this is a light wind pintail, And after I vacuum this onto the deck, and with this rocker jig in place, to set the rocker more or less, then I will reshape the bottom of this board, and I'll talk about that as I do it. All right, taping off the end of the vacuum bag. You want to seal off the one end of the vacuum bag. You'll have to seal off both ends eventually, but you want a nice straight tape line, so I'm using the vacuum bag roll to actually line it up. So you want to get the masking tape well stuck to both sides. So you lay it down and fold it over and try to seal it off as best you can. Later, when the suction starts, you're going to find a few little holes here and there, and you just patch them with a piece of tape. Okay, so I drew a line here because I'm going to tape off this section where the divinyl does not go. This is the divinyl, because now I've got to put a layer of glass and resin here. And then this gets glued onto it while it's held in place with this rocker jig. All right, the glass is on. Now keep in mind, this can be all raggedy, doesn't matter, because this part just fits under the divinyl. This is just a bonding layer. This is just there to hold the resin in place. And notice how I don't come to the edges. There's no reason to come to the edges, because later when I laminate it, I'm going to lap the rails and it'll seal off any deficiencies there. All right, I'm mixing up the resin in this tiny little bucket here because that's probably all I need. That was about 5 pumps, so I added 1 1/4 pump of hardener. And here we go. Well, I forgot to tape it off before I mixed the resin, but I'm a pretty good taper offer since I used to airbrush boards for the great Jimmy Lewis back in the 80s, when Jimmy was the king of speedboard makers. And so anyway, I could feel that this resin was beginning to heat up a little in the pot, so I poured it out so that it wouldn't kick on me. All right, you don't want to worry about getting any bubbles in there. You just want to get the cloth all wetted out. And my masking tape is coming up. I don't know if it's just old tape or it's just too freaking hot. There, I had to stick it all back down, and now it's going to get sealed and go in the bag. So we're at about, we're almost 100 degrees. Okay, the rocker jig is in position. It helps to tape it down a little bit, and this little stiffener board to keep it from rolling the bottom too much as the vacuum bag comes tight. But I'm wrapping this tape a little bit so it doesn't hang up going in the bag. And it's time to slide this puppy into the bag. And I've got to put that suction plug in first, but I won't film that. I got to get that done. All right, the vacuum is working. It's a tiny little pump, so it's going to take a while to get the excess air out of here. But this is a real critical stage, because you don't want any holes in the bag as it starts to tighten up on your production here. So I'm just sort of pulling out the creases. And the key thing is this thing is in position where it needs to be, and it's got a little ventilator underneath, so it draws air from more than just the suction point. Alright, the vacuum pump is still working on getting all this air out of the bag, but it seems to be slowly getting the job done. Now, the resin, check the resin. Oh, it's starting to kick. You can see that it's starting to kick a little there, but that's okay, because it will not be as kicked under the foam as it is here in the pot. Well, I can't be sure about that, but I think this thing will start to do its thing in a minute here. So I'm not worried. This stuff basically turns into chewing gum for a while, And you can, that's what's really fun about working with epoxy, is you have lots of time to move it around. It's a huge difference from using polyester, which is basically, you better have your shit together when you're laminating with polyester, because it doesn't forgive you. All right, here we go now. This is the most fun part. Now remember, I've got to keep stretching out the plastic on the deck, because the goal is to get this soft foam blank to conform with this stringer jig, this rocker jig. All right, I got to work. Okay, so I took a couple pieces of foam and put them under the ends here, just to help out the rocker jig a little bit. You can see how it's nice and flush at the tips. And so it is basically putting the rocker into the board now to some degree. But what I will be doing is I will probably screw this thing right to the deck of the board, and then I will laminate the bottom and the rails. And once the rails are laminated, they will definitely hold the rocker of the board. So this is a whole different technique that I developed. Instead of using a polyester blank with a wooden stringer, I use the rails, and you can build up strength in the rails because they act like I-beams, and that's how you hold the rocker in the board and you make it strong, because most boards break. When they break, they tear from the rail. And so I've seen a lot of windsurfers break and surfboards break, and by building up the thickness in the rail with glass or carbon or what have you, you can really make a strong board. So I can run my hand down the deck here and I can feel the heat of the resin kicking under that Divinycell. Here it's cool, but here I feel the heat. It's a couple degrees warmer than the outside temperature, which is pretty hot here. We're looking at we're looking at about almost 100 degrees. So, and you can see it sucking down everywhere, every little wrinkle, sort of like in that previous test of the system with the vacuum bag. It's doing what it needs to do. It hasn't shown yet on the gauge. It hasn't started drawing yet. Hopefully it will shortly. All right, this might be as good as it gets, but it is doing what it needs to do. I can just tell by the pressure in the deck that it's holding the foam onto the styrofoam. And it hasn't registered on the gauge yet, so there might be a pinhole leak somewhere. But I'll just let this thing run, see what happens. I'll come back in an hour. In the time that I came up here, which is just a couple minutes, it jumped to 7 pounds, as you can see. So I might start to bleed a little air into there. Okay, it's time to take it out of the vacuum bag. The resin has kicked, and I've got these screws and my handy drill screwdriver, and I will now take it out of the bag and I will fix this rocker jig onto the deck, because the next step now will be to grind this down a bit, and then I will reshape the bottom, and then I will I don't know if I'll be doing these cutouts. This is where a traction flute will go. I might even put 2 in there, so we'll see. But I need to reshape the bottom before I laminate it. Okay, it's out of the bag and the rocker jig is screwed to the deck, so it's holding what little rocker the board has in place, and you can see that it doesn't have that much rocker, but because it's a fairly short board, that's a good thing. You don't need much rocker with a short board because it's easy to pull the nose up. Now I'm going to draw a center line on it so that I can reshape this bottom. All right, this is the bottom, and this will be the bottom turn rail, my toe side rail. This will be my cutback side. I'm going to take out this piece of foam here, put a wing there, and then it will have this traction flute here. It'll have another bonus traction flute here because I want to try that out. And then this will be the nose of the board, and the nose of the board will also have a traction flute up here after I cut this out, and that will be to give me upwind ability when I'm on the heel side. So when I'm heel side going upwind, this will be my traction flute that I depend on to hold the edge along with this whole rail. This rail will be my windward running rail. Should be interesting. This board is a bit wider at this end, which is the nose basically, but it's reversible, so it's about a 15-inch wide nose, and that's a foot up, and then we've got about a 14-inch wide tail here. So it's gonna be fun. I expect this board to work pretty well in waves and on flat water, but we'll have to see. Okay, that's what you call a wingtail. That's a wing pin. It's asymmetrical. This is the toe side rail, and this is the cutback rail. So this is my pivot point right here. This corner is what I will be pivoting off of as I'm laying into a cutback. And then this is the nose, but it will also become the tail when I want to go upwind either direction. Well, heel side. If I go upwind heel side, then this is the rail. Better make sure. It's sort of confusing. Whoops. This is actually going to be the heel side rail here, but that'll be just fine. I'll have a nice bottom turn rail that I can really bury. There'll be a traction flute off of this, and I've noticed that the traction flutes actually generate some lift, and I will put a traction flute under here also, so this will have some bite going upwind. But this okay, so it's confusing. Okay, so this side here on the right, this is my bottom turn rail. So I will carve off of this toe side and then cut back off of this rail. And then if I want to go upwind and I want to go heel side upwind, then this becomes the tail. So I guess I could have avoided cutting this off, but to keep it in line with the design, I might as well do it. I don't think it's going to hurt. In fact, it might be something more desirable because it gives me a rail that I can really put in the water when I'm carving toe side. I can always glue it back on there if I want and keep this shape like this, but I think I will take it off. All right, I just got off the phone with my buddy and mentor, the guru, Jimmy Lewis, the legend. Jimmy the Legend Lewis, the fastest. So anyway, I'm going to build up a little masking tape here so I don't grind the styrofoam. And this tape is pretty crappy, but I've got this 1/8 inch edge that I've got to grind off now so that when I lap the rails, I have a clean lap. All right, I used the grinder and took it down, and I use a block, the grinding disc. I use a block and I run it along here, and now I have it taken down pretty nice. And here I can pull the tape off, and you can see it's got a slight little ridge there, and I can just putty that up before I actually laminate the rails, and there will be no discernible ridge. All right, the board is coming to life. This is the cutback side rail. I got a nice wide tail here to jammer out on, and then if I want to lay into my front side carve, I've got a nice wide point forward bottom turn rail. And let's see what we got here on the bottom. I'm gonna have to get out some paint. I took some off here by trying to carve a V in there, and I'll put a ridge line down the center when I do my hot coat. So I'll create that effect of having a V from here to here later on. And I think I got to throw a little paint on there now. I got some wet paint, and this is the board starting to come together. It's got some sort of blocky looking ends here, but that's because this will be removed here after it's glassed, where I put in the traction flute. There'll probably be two of them here just for laughs, just to see how it works. You know, always experimenting. All right, all better now. I'll slap a little there on the deck. Trick is not to get any paint on my shaping racks. Yeah, and this is the outline of the new board, the curvilinear model. This is in my patent. This is covered with my patent that was recently granted.